Bias. Bias is something that is spoken about a lot at the moment. We've got a huge amount of history where we have judgment and prejudice and hurt that has resulted in many people feeling marginalized, unheard, unseen, and lost in the world. And so whether you're in the world of work, whether you're in the world of religion, whether you're in the world of your own family, looking at how do we heal bias and what is the role that we play in bias. And as a starting point to bias, we need to know it hurts and it happens. So it is a hurtful experience for anyone that is on the receiving end of judgment, of not being valued, seen, heard, trusted, loved because of the nature of who they are, for something that they cannot change. And it's natural. And I'm going to talk today about the naturalness of why bias happens, how bias happens, and also the courage of your role in shifting your own bias in the world. And as a starting point, we need to know that bias, as I said, hurts because judgment keeps us separate. Judgment, which is a natural thing, Eric, my partner, always says, I'm not sure what happens on your planet, but on our planet we judge. And judgment happens. And when I am judging or feel judged, I feel opposite to you, I feel separate to you. And that separation, as you can see on the sketch notes, has a sort of idea of us standing on opposite sides of a bridge, unable to connect. There are many, many, many of us in the world that are lonely. There are many, many, many of us in the world that are insecure. It is a natural part of each human being's experience. And sadly, most of us have quite a lot of internal judgment. The last thing we need is a lot of external judgment. What is also quite fascinating about bias, and there is many types of bias. We can understand confirmation bias and halo bias and all sorts of things. You can go and look up those. There are lots and lots of videos on the internet around them. But today we're going to talk about unconscious bias, bias that exists in your behavior without you paying attention to it. And unconscious bias is the thing that actually hurts the most because we keep reinforcing it with the idea that I'm right. And if I'm right, you're wrong. And that amplifies the conflict, the war, the judgment, the separation that exists. Is by definition, if I'm attached to being right about something, my sole purpose is to try and make you wrong about it. This is not the place of love. This is not the place of respect. This is not the place of kindness. And it's certainly not the place of holding a unity together, of community. So how do I learn how to stand true in my truth and respect your truth as being yours without it being in competition to each other? And then we can start to have a bridge that builds between our separateness to connect. Now, I said I was going to talk about how bias happens quite naturally. And there is a model that I'm going to take you through to understand how we structure our world. And I'm going to work backwards through that. I'm going to give some examples as we go through it, and I'm going to invite you to look for yourself at something in your life where you're getting results that you're wanting to change. Maybe you're in conflict with a certain type of person or a certain group of people in the world. Maybe you keep being triggered by certain things. And to use this model as a way of getting to understand yourself a little bit better. As a starting point, we need to look at the results we're getting in our life. If I had to take money, for example, if at the end of every month I am 500 Rand short or 5,000 Rand short or 500,000 Rand short, whatever it is, if that pattern continues, if that result continues, I have to look at that's the reality I'm facing. That's the same if I'm looking at my workload, if I'm looking at my relationships, if I'm looking at any aspect of my life, my well-being. Is the results I'm getting, one of the most courageous things we need to start doing is being realistic about it. What is the reality that we're facing? And it's very hard for us to pay attention to the results. Most of us want to blame someone else for the results we get in our life. Most of us want to avoid it. If I don't look at it, it will go away. But those results are information. It's profound information. Because once we can start looking at this is a persistent result that I keep getting in my life, I can then go and start looking at what am I doing that participates in that? How am I co-authoring that reality? This is called taking accountability. This is noticing the relationship between the way you behave and the results you get. Now, not in a way of shaming yourself and blaming yourself, but again in a way of saying, let me start understanding how this works. My son, when he was younger, came home and he had failed a test. And I said, do you know why? And he said, well, I didn't study. Cause effect. Kind of works that way. We can also have the reality where you're studying a lot and you're not passing. So something else is going on. But we need to understand the role you play in the results you get. Again, our natural tendency is to blame someone else. And if not to blame someone else, to blame ourselves. Accountability is the opposite of blame. It's ownership. Oh, that is what is going on here. So if we bring this back to bias, if there's a certain kind of person or people in the world that I keep being in conflict with, there may be a need for you to look at how you show up in those relationships, what you bring into those relationships. Now, most change initiatives or most or self-help philosophies would often stop at this point, at the point of behavior breeds results. That's simple enough for us to know. But let's go a little bit deeper, because we need to start being a little bit more insightful and compassionate to ourselves. And we need to understand behind the behavior is emotion. Emotion is energy for movement. It's energy for change. And so when I wake up in the morning, the way I feel impacts the way I behave and impacts the results I get for the day. If I'm pissed off with the world, I behave a certain way, don't I? I get slightly different results to when I'm in a good mood and I walk around being nice to people. So understanding our emotions and being aware of our emotions, again, not with the idea of trying to only be happy, but to be real and aware of how our emotions impact our behavior. This is the heart of emotional intelligence. Of saying emotions are calling for attention. Is the way you're behaving appropriate? Emotions are never the problem. Behavior can be a problem. You can be angry, you don't have to shoot people. Yeah? You can be hurt and you don't have to try and attack people. So breaking the cycle in our own journey of our emotions and our behaviors, that's adultness. That's healing. That's where we grow up. To bring this back to bias, is I may feel insecure when I'm around a group of people that are different to me, that have a different religious bias or a different racial preference, or they do things differently to me. That may be insecure for me. It actually is true. Most human beings are insecure about anybody around anyone too different to them. That insecurity may lead me to be scared, and when I'm scared, I attack, and when I attack, I hurt. So I need to understand I can be scared and insecure, but I don't have to attack. And learning how to do things differently is at the heart of healing bias, at the heart of being able to pay attention to how you feel and to own that, to disclose that, and to take care of that in yourself. So what's behind emotions starts to become interesting if we've got results, an outcome of behavior, and behavior is driven by emotion. If we start looking behind emotion, we can start to see that we all have a general attitude of life. You'll see on the picture there's sort of like the glasses. It's the filters and the lens with which we look at the world. Your attitude is a little bit like the clothes you wear. It's kind of like the way you show up. If I walk down the road with a red hat on, everybody would say, oh, there's the girl with the red hat on. Yeah? That's an attitude. It's a way of being in the world. And our attitude has a sort of lens of how we filter in information. So if I tend to walk around with the attitude of love, I see things through the lens of love. If I walk around with the attitude of hatred, of self-persecution, of the world is dangerous, I filter in information around that. Yeah? I often, in the before times, before COVID, would do workshops where people had driven there and somebody would say, oh, the robots aren't working. It's just this country's going to a ball of crap. And I'd say, how many robots? And they'd look at me like, what? I'd say, how many robots were working? Because what you filtered in is only the information that you want to see. And so we often delete a lot of information because of our attitude. Our attitudes, though, are driven by our belief system. And this is where it gets hard, because ultimately the results you're getting in your life are because of the beliefs you have. And the difficulty with beliefs is they are self-fulfilling prophecies because of that. The beliefs that you have are thoughts that you've made true. We don't believe everything we think, but we have taken a thought and I've said that is fact. If I believe all black men are dangerous, I have coded that as truth, as fact. And what will happen as I walk through my day is I have the attitude which will filter in that information. I will have the fear that goes along with that. I will behave in that way and I will create distance and judgment and separation in my world. And the sad part is most of our beliefs are thoughts we swallowed when we were young. They're thoughts that we took into reality when we were young, based on what other people told us, based on people that we love and trust and what they told us. We can also make a belief true in moments of trauma and moments of hurt. I can be in a relationship and somebody cheats on me and then all men are cheaters. That belief becomes coded as a reality. And so the ability for us to pause and release the need to be right and to interrogate our own belief system is really at the heart of healing bias. And this is what makes it difficult to do. My hope from sharing this today is firstly to get you into the awareness that you are biased, you are a racist, you are a generalist, we all have bias, you can't not be. It's not something to be ashamed of, it's something to get curious about, to notice what are the beliefs I have that are holding that in place, and to interrogate it with a curiosity, is it true? And I'm going to finish off today with, this is a book called The Gift by Edith Eger. And she's got some amazing principles in it. She was actually in Auschwitz, and so she then became a therapist, and she's got a book that talks about a lot of principles for healing. And these are her words. I hadn't considered the broader impact of legacy until the early 1980s, when a 14-year-old boy came to his court-appointed therapy session. Wearing a brown shirt and brown boots, he leaned his elbow on the table and started ranting about how to make America white again, about how to kill all the Jews, the niggers, the Mexicans, and the Chinks. Fury swept through me. I wanted so badly to shake him, to say, how dare you talk like that? Do you know who I am? My mother died in a gas chamber. Just when I thought I might reach out my hands and throttle him, I heard a voice within me say, find the bigot in you. Impossible, I thought. I'm not a bigot. I'm a Holocaust survivor and an immigrant. I lost my parents to hate. I used the colored bathroom at the factory in Baltimore in solidarity with my African American co-workers. I marched for civil rights with Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm not a bigot. But to stop bigotry means you start with yourself. You let go of judgment and you choose compassion. I took a deep breath. I leaned in. I gazed at him with as much kindness as I could muster and said, Tell me more. It was a tiny gesture of acceptance, not of his ideology, but of his personhood, and was enough for him to speak a little of his lonely childhood, absent parents, and severe neglect. Hearing his story reminded me that he hadn't joined an extremist group because he was born with hate. He was seeking what we all want: acceptance, attention, affection. Even a Nazi can be a messenger of God. The boy was my teacher, guiding me to the choice. I always have to replace judgment with compassion, to recognize our shared humanity, and to practice love. If you want to be an agent of healing bias for yourself and others in the world, learning to be more compassionate with yourself around your judgments is the starting point. And then to choose compassion over judgment, to connect and build bridges. Sending you lots of love. Namaste.